Hey, what's up guys? Back again with another episode in the Kotlin series. In this episode, I'm going to teach you guys about the require function. Now, sometimes when you have a class, you want to add something called validation logic, which simply means that you want to validate the information passed in, like the width and the height. Maybe you want to make sure they're not negative, for example, make sure they're positive values. There's no way to do that within a primary constructor because it's just this part here. There's no body for it exactly. So you can actually use a secondary constructor for that. So what we can do is take out these properties from the primary constructor and just move them into the class body. So let's get rid of this. And then we can actually leave them uninitialized, just leave them as they are with the data type, but don't give them default values. And then what we'll do is add a secondary constructor like this, and then we could do width, int, and height. As you can see here, what this is doing is expecting a width and a height, but not setting them as properties, because that's what the primary constructor is for. You can either specify a property in the class body or in the primary constructor if you use a val or a var keyword. Since for the secondary constructor, it's not using val or var, it's just having them as basically parameters, you can do with these whatever you want, right? But one thing is that these properties that we have here must be initialized in some way. There's a bunch of different ways to do that with classes, but the most simple way is to give them a default value. Another way is to use a primary constructor, but another way is to use this secondary constructor. So we can do this dot width is equal to width, and this dot height is equal to height. So what this is doing is taking the width and the height that's passed into the secondary constructor when you're instantiating the class here as an object, and we're using it to set the values of the properties. So when you say this dot width, it's referring to the properties, but when you do width just by itself without the this in front of it, that's referring to the parameter for the class constructor. So this is basically doing the same exact thing that a primary constructor would do behind the scenes. It's just a little more work because with a primary constructor, you can define your properties and the requirements of those properties and set them all at once. But for this way of doing it, we first define the properties in the class body, then we make our secondary constructor tell it what to expect, and then we have to set the properties manually. The benefit though of doing this is that we can add requirements. So we could do, for example, require, and to this you just basically give it a condition. So for example, we could do width is greater than 0, and then we could add this part, this little code block here. And then we could also do the same thing for the height. So we'll copy this and then move it here, change it to height, and change this to height. So using this require function here will make it so that if this condition is not met, where the width is greater than 0 or the height is greater than 0, it will throw an illegal argument exception, which is an error that makes it so that you cannot create the object of rectangle. So with that said, basically you're utilizing the secondary constructor here since it has a body of code to run some other code, which in this case is the required code. So you're adding requirements to your class construction, making it so that you cannot actually create the class if you don't satisfy these requirements. In this case, its width is greater than 0 and height is greater than 0, okay? Something else that you can do is add on to this. So you can say but was width, so you can make it a little more clear so that if someone is using your class and they get the error, it'll tell them exactly why the error was happening, like what the value was that caused the error in the first place. All right, so now that we have defined our class here with the secondary constructor and our requirements, we can actually use it. So we can go ahead and do something like var rectangle1 is equal to rectangle, and now we need to pass in a width and a height. Since we have defined a secondary constructor, but we don't have a primary constructor, you have to use the secondary constructor to construct the object. So we have to pass in a width and a height, so we can do like 10 and 12, for example. But if we set it to -10, for example, let's see what happens. There we go, so we get exception in main. Width must be positive, but was -10, so that makes perfect sense. And then we could do the same thing for height real quick. There we go, so height must be positive, but was -12. So that's pretty cool, right? We can add these validation requirements so that the data that we pass in matches what we expect. So this here can be whatever condition you want, whatever evaluates as a boolean. So we can make this as advanced as we want to. So we could do something like width is greater than 0 and width is less than 100. So that would make it so that the width is between 0 and 100, non-inclusive. So you just need to modify your error message so that if this is false, the person who's trying to instantiate an object of the class knows what to do. Or what you could do is you could take this and just add another requirement, to make it separate. So require, boom, and then just add a new message for that new requirement. So width must be lower than 100. So hopefully you're seeing why secondary constructors are pretty useful, especially if you have requirements for your classes, and also you just want to run other code every time you create an object of the class type, because a primary constructor cannot really do that for you. Another thing that we can do is add, let's just say that we have another secondary constructor, like side int. We did this example last time, so you can pass in a side, and then this will be the basically the size for the width and the height. So there's two ways we can do this. Previously, when we learned about secondary constructors, we learned that they have to delegate to the primary constructor. But since we don't have one, we don't really have that requirement. So we could either delegate to this first secondary constructor here, and this will set it like that, or we can just set it inside of here. So we can do this dot width is equal to side, and then this dot height is equal to side. The only downside to this constructor not delegating to this constructor is that it does not inherit the requirements. So you would have to take them and add them to this one as well. So it kind of duplicates your code a little bit. So for example, we could, paste that and then just change everything to side, make sure that side is greater than 0, and then get rid of this. And then also make sure side is less than 100, for example. So now you have two secondary constructors. They're both doing validation by using the require function. Another option is to delegate, like I said before, so we can get rid of all this and we could just have it do this. And now the option is width and height, so it's going to target this one here, and we could do side and side. And then we can get rid of this because this one is already doing it here. So let's get rid of all that. So now what's happening is whenever you call this secondary constructor here, it's going to delegate that information to this one here, and it's going to do the requirement checking, which is nice. It'll basically just inherit it and also run this code here, which will set the property values. One other small thing that I want to show you is that sometimes you usually define properties based on other properties that you pass into your secondary constructor. So as an example, we could have a val area property, which is an int. As you can see, there's no default value. We could add one like 0 or something like that. Or we could just do this dot area is equal to width and height. And so now after you set the width and the height based on what you pass in, you're also going to calculate the area and set it on that property. One thing that you can do to improve this though is actually just take this out and then take this out and make it a function. So you can do function area int is equal to width times height. That way you don't have to worry about recalculating it every time you change the width and height. Every time you call this area function, it's just going to automatically calculate it again. But that just goes to show you the different things that you can do with secondary constructors, how you can use them to set these requirements, set these properties, and even compute properties for your class objects. In the next episode, we're going to see how we can improve this using initializer blocks, so stay tuned for that. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace. So that's it for this video, everybody. I really hope you learned something new. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to also check the description below for important links to code and other resources, but also really important, join our Discord. We have a big community of over 5,000 programmers, and it's a place where you can find new friends or get help on any code that you're stuck on. If you want to support what I do on this channel, please consider hitting the join button below, and this will allow you to support my channel for as low as $1 a month, but there are different tiers to choose from if you want to. For anyone that becomes a member on my channel, you get a special rank on my Discord server, early access to new videos, and you can just see yourself on the screen right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. Thank you so much. And that's it. Peace.